Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Rob Curgenven, Deputy of the States of Guernsey, and we are going to discuss the proposed tax reforms for the bailiwick of Guernsey. Rob, good to see you. Thanks very much for sparing me some time. Appreciate
Not a
it.
problem. Thanks for inviting me on.
Now, first of all, we get these conflicting bits of information. One week we're in deficit, the next week we're in surplus. Where are we actually in terms of the states of Guernsey and the so-called deficit?
That really depends on who you ask and how they interpret the accounts. I think the rather than me explain where I see it and do a hash of it, a hash job of it, the best way of explaining would be I don't know if you've read the recent Scrutiny Management Committee comment on the accounts, have you?
Yeah, I had a quick look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that explains it best.
Okay.
They're going on about how, although it's presented correctly and accurate, or ostensibly accurately, there is a lot of confusion over, what they've got three different types of, reserves, and well, they've actually got more than that, and it's very complicated, and we don't really know our net figure at the end of the day, and it keeps changing.
It's not a very good way to govern a community, is it?
No, I mean we changed over our accounting standards. I'll probably get this wrong, but it's IPSAS. So any accounts before last year aren't really a fair comparison,
Yeah.
and they keep changing how they measure things and the names of all relevant like pots of money and how we refer to them stuff. So it makes it even more complicated, which is one of the things obviously the scrutiny committee picked up on and said that look, we need a bit more clarity. If we're struggling to understand this as elected members, then how did the public feel about it?
And of course, you are an accountant by profession. So, I
I
mean,
am, yes.
if it's tending to fool you, where do
Yeah,
the rest of us sit on it?
it's very confusing, very confusing. I mean, I don't profess to being, an amazing or competent accountant, but yes, I am trained as an accountant. But they do really confuse me.
Yeah,
And
sure.
one of the things you said before about the funding gap. So one of the things about the funding gap is obviously how much we want to spend and how much is our outgoings are. Now, what we want to spend has changed to 2% of whatever they said. We want to send 2% of X on capital infrastructure or whatever it is. Why? How did they come to that arbitrary figure of 2%? Why do we want to spend that much? Where does that come from? What's it based on? And obviously, if we change that down, 1.5%, 1%, then the so-called funding gap is going to be a lot less than it is presented at the moment.
Okay, so looking at the release they put out the other day, which more or less covers everything, savings and public expenditure reform, and they're going to reduce costs by a minimum of the 20 million a year agreed through the government work plan, 1% per annum efficiencies in the public sector. Do you see that happening?
Not really.
No.
I'm not sure how it is. So it's very interesting because I seconded an amendment last year with Deputy Haley Camp, which is to bring in zero-based budgeting.
Yeah.
But that has been ignored, even though it was voted through the states, and they're doing something called priority-based budgeting. And one of the things the states will tell you is that priority-based budgeting and zero-based budgeting, well, they're the same, right? They're not the same thing, as any accountant will tell you. They may have similarities, but they are certainly not the same thing. Zero based budgeting, in a nutshell, is going back to everyone at the coalface. You have the frontline staff
Yeah.
or policy officers or whatever department, whatever person you're thinking about, and you go back to them and you ask them to say where is every pound going. We need to account for it. So it's not the same. It's not the usual budgeting where you get the budget, you get X amount, and then you add on an inflationary amount and like 2% or whatever. It's like, no, do we need to be doing this? How's it done? And tracking it back from right, as I said, people at the coalface, right back to a committee level. So we get an overview of exactly where every pound is going. But priority-based budgeting, although they're saying we'll do this, they're not the same thing. And you have to bear in mind that the amendment that Deputy Camp and I that was successfully voted through, it was across the board.
Yeah.
It was for every committee, whereas the priority-based budgeting at the moment focuses on three service levels. So three service level areas. So that's SPU, States Property Unit. I think it was adult disability, and pardon me because I've forgotten the third one. So I mean that's not very comprehensive at all, at all.
And when you look at a £20 million saving, is that inevitably going to mean redundancies?
Well, I mean, the BBC did it recently, didn't they? They were looking at
Yeah.
cutting costs and they were looking at getting rid of hundreds of staff, but that doesn't seem to have occurred to our current Policy and Resource Committee.
Okay. Let's get on to the income tax changes. It's going to cost 28 million a year. So that's on the deficit side, isn't it, in terms of your accounting system? Um, and one thing I couldn't quite understand about it was this 15% initial tax. Now, am I right in thinking that it applies on the first £28,000 less your allowance?
Do you know what? I actually haven't looked at them in detail, so
No,
I really want to be careful about talking
but
about
is
what
that
I
a
only
fair
really know.
argument? I mean,
Yeah,
28 grand is 28 grand, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. On the face of it, yeah, I'd agree with that.
So I mean, to me, it looked a bit like smoke and mirrors to try and sell the thing to the public. I might be wrong there. Uh, and the Isle of Man got round this very easily, didn't they? They put 10% on their income tax rate and zoomed off into the distance.
Indeed.
Has that actually been considered in the States?
Well, from the information that I've seen is publicly available, I don't really know. I couldn't
Yeah,
tell you.
yeah,
So one
yeah,
of the things that I did ask in my Rule 14s to the Policy and Resources Committee, obviously who are presenting the blended tax packages, is I wanted to know the modelling, the assumptions, everything that basically at the time when the policy letter was written, just what information is that based on,
yeah.
and maybe if they've done comparisons with Jersey, which they've hinted at. I mean, it would have been eminently sensible, as you say, to do a comparison and look at Isle of Man. What have they done? What has worked? And then kind of copy for it. So I am hoping that if and when P&L release this documentation, what you've discussed and more should be in there.
Okay, so we'll wait with bated breath. Social
Indeed.
security contributions, well, that hasn't changed that much. All right, so they've gone up, I suppose, only to be expected. But, I don't think really worthy of comment in this particular interview, do you?
I think it might be worth noting that self-employed people are the highest tax people if you take tax and social.
Yeah,
And again, correct me if I'm wrong, apologize if I am, but I think it brings it up social to 14.5% if you're self-employed.
yeah,
So,
that's
I
correct.
mean, with other increases as well, because obviously you've got a lot of tradesmen and women, they drive around a lot. So, how in conjunction with the vehicle tax as well and the other changes, they're going to be hit the hardest, just
Yeah,
the self-employed.
yeah. And they're the people you really want to encourage in an economy, aren't they?
Absolutely, want to be
Yeah,
helping these people starting their own businesses and
yeah,
growing their businesses for a healthy economy.
yeah, yeah. So coming on to the transport tax changes, up till now, and this is for the benefit of the wider audience, we haven't paid road tax per se for a long, long time. It's been added into the cost of petrol and diesel, and effectively, what they're saying now is they're going to reduce that duty by 25% and bring back road tax. And apparently, they reckon that it's going to the actual reduction's worth 130 a year, and they're going to bring in the road tax, which is probably going to be similar. But of course, the one thing it does, Rob, is to catch out people with electric cars, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah, who are currently not taxed at the moment.
And are probably digging up more of the roads than people with internal combustion engines due to.
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
Well, I suppose that had to happen, and it's going to happen in the UK, as we well know. Um, I'm sorry to have to say your Rolls Royce appears to be subject to a surcharge.
Yes, indeed. A Ferrari and whatnot. Just
Yeah,
going back to the tax one. I mean, I haven't looked at it as we said off camera before. I haven't looked at it in too much detail because I'm predominantly focusing on the GST, which is a headline
yeah,
subject.
yeah.
I don't see how. Let's just say I'd like to check again the underlying data, the models, and the assumptions for how that's going to work, should we say? But I'm certainly not adverse to electric cars being taxed. I think that is only fair that happens. But I'm not sure right now whether what has been proposed is the right way of doing it.
Mm. Well, you can't really surcharge electricity, can you, other than, through GST? But
Yeah,
which is something we can't get away from. Right, introduction of International Service Entity Scheme. That's a bit of a mouthful.
it is, isn't it? It's basically just if you don't want to pay, if you fit within the parameters defined by the policy letter,
Yeah,
if they're in then it's just certain companies can not pay, they can, it's like an opt-out fee, pay GST or pay the IC fee, so you don't have to pay GST. Now notably, the estimated revenue, the income from the ICE scheme alone is slated to be 10 to 12 million.
hmm.
Now I have asked about that because that's what Jersey purportedly gets on an annual basis is 10 to 12 million. So I asked the question of, obviously Jersey and Guernsey are similar, sister islands, but Jersey's economy is a lot bigger and better than ours, and there are a lot of structural differences as well. And I don't think that we would be getting in as much revenue from this scheme that Jersey gets. So again, I'd like to see the underlying
Yeah,
assumptions and
yeah.
models.
And all of these items you're challenging in the States as and
Yes.
when they come up, and hopefully you're going to get some proper answers rather than back to the smoke and mirrors department. Corporate tax reform. Uh,
Yes.
Now, what happens if Pillar Tier 2 comes in? This is the international tax that they've been saying should be the minimum for the world, as it were,
Yeah.
15%.
Yeah.
Is that going to throw them?
Oh, I'd be very hesitant to. I know Deputy Parkinson, who's the Treasury lead, has said that I think he made an estimate of what he thinks the annual income would be. I would take a more prudent view than him because there's a lot going on with Pillar Two at the moment, especially with America. America aren't
Yeah,
really playing ball, and if they pull out, well, no one's going to stop them. What's going to happen then? So I certainly wouldn't think that it's we should rely on that, should we say? Because my argument's never been that we don't need tax reform. We definitely do need tax reform. I just don't think that what is being presented at the moment is appropriate.
yeah, yeah. Okay, well, let's get on to the dreaded one that the consumption tax, which we call goods and services tax, raises 55 million a year, most of which comes from businesses. Now, I know you're not at all happy about what's being suggested on this.
Yeah, I'm just sorry if I'm a bit slow. I'm just actually pulling up my workings on this one while I talk to you. So I've got them beside me. So firstly, so I'm just looking at my spreadsheet here. So
Yeah,
apologies if I'm
no, it's
not
okay.
looking directly at you. So the revenue that we're slated to get on this is household is 41 million, visitors is 5 million, and they've included in the ISC scheme that we have in here 11 million. So the total is 57 million. Firstly, I want to see what assumptions that is based on. How did P&R work out? What taxable consumption base did P&R use? What
Yeah,
models and assumptions did the top committee use to come to that figure? And the same with the visitor one and the ISC one. So that would be my first question. Indeed, it has been in my recent Rule 14 questions. And then I don't know if you wanted to say something about costs or just let me lead on that one.
yeah, I'll let you lead on it. Reserve
So,
the right to interrupt.
oh, please do, please do. So we've got you talked about the related mitigations before. So the changes in Social Security and income tax actually lose £28 million a year.
Yes.
So you have to deduct 28 million out from the 57 immediately, which P&O haven't done, or at least they haven't presented it that way in the policy letter, which is another, I suppose you call it gripe of mine, is there's no easily understood chronological, year by year annual breakdown of showing all of the income, estimated income, and all of the estimated costs to get to a nice little neat figure at the bottom. And then there's also other things. I don't know if I want to bore you with them, but I know the Bailiwick Express printed the spreadsheet. It's the one that I'm talking to you about. But one of the other things, if I could sum it up succinctly and in a non-complicated way, is that when you bring in a goods and service tax, it has an inflationary effect on the market.
Yeah.
So P&O have realised that, and they've estimated inflation. And bear in mind, that's an estimate. I don't know where the estimation came from. I don't know how they got 1.9%. But for the sake of argument, let's work on the assumption that bringing in GST would raise inflation by 1.9%. Now, government's not immune from inflation. Inflation doesn't, stop at the doors of Sir Charles Fossard House. So one of the things that is would potentially go up is civil service pay and pensions. So one of the statements that I've had back from the Chief Minister, Deputy de Summeray, she said that there is no agreement that civil service pay will rise in line with inflation. But if you take a graph, I was looking at one this morning. If you take a graph of civil service pay and RPIX, which is a way that the States of Guernsey measure inflation, others, other jurisdictions won't use CPI, but anyway, this is the one they use. If you look at the graph from 2008 going up, it is a bit spiky, but if you curve it out, there is a correlation, a strong correlation between inflation and civil service pay, which you'd find in the private sector too.
Yeah.
Because if you're looking to retain and keep staff, then inflation goes up and you keep them on the same real term pay, then obviously their money doesn't go as far. So you want to compensate them for that, which is fair enough. It should happen anywhere. So if you look at the graph from 2008 to now, or the most recent statistics, you will see that when inflation goes up, civil service pay goes up. That's a fact. So I don't really understand the statement that there's no agreed on uplift for civil service pay. That might be the case, but history has shown us that they are compensated, and I'm not saying that that's wrong, by the way. If you want to retain and attract and keep your staff, good staff, then obviously you're going to have to pay them well and look after them. So I went back to Deputy Tumray and I said, look, if you are saying, I do accept that civil service might not get a pay increase. There's no, it's not set in law or anything, set in stone. Does that mean that the top committee, policy and resources, will commit to a pay cut or a pay freeze in the civil service? Because for me, and please come back with what you think, is if you're saying that we're not going to be prudent and account for an uplift in costs, a pension because of inflation, then are you going to publicly state that you're not going to give them a pay rise? Yeah. Because if you're not, shouldn't we factor that in just in case? Because that's what you do from an accountancy principle of being prudent.
But aren't they on grades in addition to cost of living?
They're on grades, yes.
So their income's going up every year until they get to the top of their particular grade. And in addition to that, they're going to get the benefit of the cost of living, the inflation aspect.
Yes, I suppose in a nutshell, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. You're talking about there's different pay bands because
yes, absolutely, yeah.
We're talking about, if we use the phrase public servants, so like teachers, police officers, firemen and women, nurses, etc. They're public servants. But if you're talking about the hardcore group of civil servants sitting at Sir Charles Fossard House, I think they're called established staff.
Yeah.
But then you have like specialists that are included in that as well. So they now, and I don't know if this is true or not, but every year you're supposed to go up a pay band in the civil service. Again, I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
So they're automatically, just for the mere fact of turning up to work, you don't have to be particularly good at your job. You just turn up, right? You get a pay increase,
Yeah,
and then on top of that, you're potentially going to get an inflation-linked pay increase as well.
that's my understanding. And that's how it used to
That's,
be. Yeah, so I'm
yeah,
sure it still is from that point of view.
I
So
just wanted to caveat that by saying I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah,
That's what
no,
I've heard.
fair enough. So we'll sort of come back to that. But the 1.9% they're talking about, okay, doesn't include natural inflation, does it? It's inflation on inflation.
I don't know how they've modelled it, so
No.
I wouldn't like to say.
Well, you know, when the inflation rate was running at say 4% or something like that, you couldn't say the 1.9 was within that. It would be outside it, so it would be 4 plus 1.9. That would be the way I would see it.
That would be the way that I see it, but I think you
Okay.
would be wrong to assume that it's seen the same way by everyone. It's
We
always
are
best to check, right?
we ask the rest of them for comments. Now, if they were to implement GST, are they going to make certain businesses exempt as they are in the UK? If you've got a turnover of less than 90 grand in the UK, you can opt out of it. You still have to pay it on your purchases, but you don't actually become part of the system. Do you know if that's up for grabs?
Yeah, I think the opt and again, please don't
Yeah,
quote me on this. I believe the registration threshold is a turnover, annual turnover of £300,000.
as high as that.
So I was on social media, I think it was yesterday, and I saw a deputy state, ironically, on a social media group, Guernsey People Against GST. He said that over half of the businesses that qualify wouldn't have to register, i.e., half of the businesses, however you quantify that,
Yeah.
however you quantified that, wouldn't need to register because they're earning under 300 grand. And
Okay.
then when I pressed him, I was like, I didn't see that in the policy letter. He said it's not in the policy letter, and I said, well, what's it based on? And it was based on a comment by the previous P&R. I think it was Deputy Hellier in 2023 where he made that claim. But I haven't seen any of the evidence to back it up.
Mm. But I mean, 3 years in politics is a long, long time. So, they could well have changed their attitude during that time. The
Absolutely.
other thing that concerns me as an ancient man is the fact that I remember UK VAT coming in, okay, and it was originally 10%, and now it's 20. And in many ways, it seems so easy for government without actually having to go through any legislative process to just keep turning the screws and increasing the rate. That's a concern for you, presumably, is it?
Very much. People, I mean, it's been admitted that they want it at 5%. And I think that the phrase used by P&R was we're going to bring it in at 3% to soften the landing.
Yeah,
But I mean, 5% won't even cut it. You're looking at 8, 10, 15%.
it's got to be, hasn't it, from that
Yeah,
point of
I
view?
mean,
And the other thing that you have to ask yourself, bearing in mind what an absolute disaster Guernsey revenue is, how are they going to administer a consumption tax?
that's a very good question. And that's what I've asked too. And what's on a lot of people's mind, just not just my peers, not just the House, members of the House, but also obviously rightly members of the public. How, I got contacted the other day and I think someone was saying they're happy because they received a tax return back from 2001.
Yeah, yeah,
They were
pretty well.
happy,
Yeah,
brilliant.
yeah. And
And
I got a check from the other day for 2022,
really,
a refund. And I'm going to bore the viewers with this one because they've heard it before. Christine, my wife, got a tax assessment for 20 pence. And they told her she could pay it quarterly, 5 pence a quarter. I mean, what is
wow,
going wrong there, Rob? It's just crazy, isn't it?
yeah. To be fair to the people that work for the tax, they are really hardworking
Yeah, I
people.
know. Yeah, but they're not
But
getting the support, are they?
no, they're not getting the support. They're really not. The system is just shot, and social to a lesser well, I wouldn't really know, but I've heard that the system, how they bring in social contributions as well, is being held together with the metaphorical tape and glue.
Yeah.
And I because I'm as an accountant, I help small businesses with their quarterly social returns,
Yes.
and I know businesses that have been erroneously, they've been wrongly summoned to court for not paying their social, and it was it was a system error. It wasn't their fault. So how many people are being wrongly summoned to court? How many things are going wrong that we don't know about?
And of course, the killer is all that money they've lost on IT, and it
Yes,
works out as millions of pounds. Do you remember how much it was? Was it about
it's
50 million or
23.
something?
Yeah, it's 23 million for, and these are all approximate figures.
Yeah, yeah,
There's 23 million for MyGov, and for the transformation service for the revenue for the tax was over 20 million as well. And then you've got to think they've had the hospital overruns, which was in the previous term, and we've also got hospital overruns with the build and
yeah.
with the electronic patient record as well. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it is over 50 million, but what the upper limit for that estimate would be, no one knows.
But is that the fault of the provider? Some of it?
I don't know.
Well, if it is, you should, or rather the state should be knocking on the door and saying, "Well, we want some money back."
Yeah, I mean that would probably happen in the real world, but
Yeah.
God knows it's going to happen here.
This is the world of politics.
It is, yeah, it's the world of government. I mean, I come from the private sector,
Of
obviously,
course,
and
yes. Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah, yeah.
finance, and
Yeah.
it's certainly a different world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you're sticking in there.
Yeah, trying to, yeah, trying to ask. Well, one of the things that on this particular one is, this is the biggest change to Guernsey's tax system in about 80 years
Yeah.
and older. And it is going to outlast, the effects are going to outlast this assembly by decades as well. So we've got to get it right, you
Mm.
know. And there's a lot of deputies claiming that they work on the principles of openness, transparency, and they're evidence based. So it worries me how the package is being presented. That the deputies that are saying those kind of things that would support that package, because it seems contrary to the principles of openness, transparency, and evidence led. Because what the policy letter asserts, and that's what it is. It's a bunch of assertions, as in assertion is not a proven
No,
statement.
no.
They're just assertions. And, it all could be fine. They could be very accurate. They could be absolutely brilliant. Nothing like my projected 1.1 million loss, where I fully admit that I've made mistakes in there. But I think the argument at the moment, and I wrote about this, the argument is if you have the workings, why not release them?
Yeah. Now, you did
If you
get
have
hold
the
of some
initial,
information, didn't you, through freedom of information? But was that difficult to get hold of?
that was the Bailiwick Express,
Yeah,
Guernsey.
yeah,
So they, unbeknownst to me, they put in a freedom of information asking a lot of the questions that I did,
yeah,
and this is according to the Bailiwick Express. They wrote back and said, well, they wrote an article about it and said that P&R basically said, wait till the tax policy letters that's just comes out, and you'll have all your answers there. And they had a look and they went, well, they haven't been answered, and they
yeah,
have actually asked some questions, actually quite a lot of questions similar to mine. So I submitted my questions via the parliamentary process. So there's a process called Rule 14s,
right.
which is you elected members can write officially under the parliamentary rules to a committee president, and that committee president has to furnish the elected member publicly with a reply within 15 days, and they can ask for an extension. And one of the other things that concerns me slightly is that the my questions. So my questions were just, again, sorry to bore your listeners and you, but my questions were simply like, basically, what are your models and assumptions? What are you basing that
Yeah,
amount on? That amount on? That amount? Can we have a look
yeah,
at the evidence and models you've relied on, please? But P&R won't release the initial documentation, and now they're saying that the answers to my questions have to be delayed for a week because one civil servant's away. So it doesn't bring much confidence that they kind of have the level of detail required to be presenting such a detailed and far-reaching policy before the states.
But if they can't sell it to the States because of the bits that are missing, things like that, how on earth are they going to sell it to the general public?
I mean,
Just won't.
no, the general public have made it clear they don't want it. Social media activities hotting up, the letters coming into the press, letters coming into deputies. Every single one of them, apart from one, has been negative about GST, saying
Yeah.
that deputies aren't listening. We've marched, and it's just intensifying again.
I just don't see it, and I think an awful lot of people are going to find it very, very difficult to run their businesses if they're over the 300,000. They're going to have to employ more staff. Presumably, they're going to send around GST inspectors to jail them if they're out of line. Yes, as
Well,
per
that
the
was
UK.
another. That's actually a very important point. I was actually speaking to a senior police officer over here the other day, and it's funny enough, we were just talking about VAT fraud. So
Yeah,
obviously in England, HMRC, they come after tax evasion,
yeah, sure.
and they have a criminal department. Over here, we don't have that. Now, I'm not sure that customs, with what they have at the moment, are going to be able to cope. And I'm not sure with the setup about how the legislation around fraud and how the money split between the police and the other units that investigate fraud and whatnot, how who's going to do what, how that's going to work. Do we need more stuff? I mean, have they thought about these things? I, d-
I
I,
rather get the impression they probably haven't. You
I,
know,
I don't. I just don't think they have.
I think they've based it all on Jersey. I don't know what problems Jersey have had with collection, but inevitably, when you have a consumption tax, you are going to have problems. You can't escape. It's not like the old ETI where it goes through every quarter and the tax is paid. And yeah, I mean, I think that it's very concerning for the public to sort of see a situation where, it just hasn't been thought through and they're not coming back with the sort of answers that we want to see. You know, I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
55 million isn't much, is it?
Well, then again, take off the 28 million
Yeah,
immediately.
it's even less.
I mean, it's even less. I mean, I sent you a spreadsheet, didn't I? I'm just going
You
to pull it
did.
up again.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
again, I know this is wrong because I've accounted for GST in the cost, but I haven't accounted for it in the income. So
no,
it has a net effect if you account for it properly, and I don't think I have done, which is absolutely fine. But
mm,
then again, has P&R included it in the
yeah,
income?
yeah,
So I need that answered as well.
yeah,
But my I've amended it because so the policy letter said they needed six in paragraph 13.4. They said they needed 16 more staff. So I estimated that would be, I think it was 50 grand each. Yeah, that
yeah,
would be 50 times 16, 800 grand.
yeah,
But I recently saw Deputy DeSummery say it was going to be between 1.2 and 1.7 million. So I've just stuck in 1.6. So with my amended calculations, GST loses us nearly 2 million a year.
yeah.
And
Well,
again, I know that that's wrong,
yeah,
but I mean, why do they need a civil servant and just one specific civil servant who's on holiday? Why can't the members of P&L come back to me and say, well, actually, because if you look at, I sent you my workings, I think, so I
yes,
put a note in there and said, this is where I got this from. This
yeah,
is what I've assumed. All of my
yeah.
workings. Here's the notes. Linked it through, so they could rebut it. So I'm just wondering why a member of P&L hasn't come back and go, well, actually, Rob, just there, and there, and
Yeah.
you know,
If you're wrong, they should repudiate it, and if you're right, they should admit you're right, shouldn't they? Simple as that.
yeah.
But there we
One of
are.
the things. So I asked. So there's two things that I just want to clarify for your listeners is
Yeah,
that I've asked P&R for the initial assumptions and modelling, analysis and reports, everything and anything
yeah,
that they base the policy letter on.
yeah,
So they've told us they've gone out, they've done all these analysis, everything, and then they got a huge chunk of all of this, and then they wrote the policy letter based on that, right? So I've asked for that, but they won't answer the question. I'm saying, do you have it? Will you release it? If you won't release it, why not? And they're not answering. They're not releasing it. and they're not telling me why they're not releasing it. And what they're saying is, we will give you the information in your requested format. So what they're doing is they will be they will be tailoring it, should we say,
Yeah.
to my answers.
Yeah.
But I didn't ask for that. I asked for the original unedited analyses documentation, whatever you want to call it. And I also asked for a response to my questions. But if they just released this in the first place, I could probably work this out. They probably wouldn't have to show me. So I
Yeah.
don't know why they're making it, an issue.
It's worrying, isn't it?
I mean, if you've got the reports right, if you've got hundreds, thousands of pages of reports, and it backs your case,
Yeah.
you're going to release it, aren't
Of
you?
course you are. So there's obviously something to hide there,
I,
or an
I mean,
admission to make.
I wouldn't make any assumptions. I'm
No.
just, wondering out loud.
Well, can I ask you on behalf of the poor old Alderney lot,
Sure,
just to keep banging the drum, please, Rob, because it's quite clear that we need people like you to query what's going on. The man in the street can't do it, so it's down to you to do it for us, please. Rob,
absolutely.
thank you so much for sparing me some time. We've just about run out of time, but it's gone very well. Many thanks.
Thank you very
Hope to
much.
speak to you again. Thank you.
Not a problem. Thanks very much.